Parkour is a staple of Assassin's Creed, almost a video game feature made famous by Assassin's Creed, the act of being able to climb anything, anywhere, at any time. I tell you, when I first watched that E3 2007 gameplay of Assassin's Creed 1, I was blown away by the scale. Back in 2007, this was genuinely crazy. No game had done this. Not just an open world, but one you could interact with on a large scale, a world that allowed for every window, every crack in a building, every ledge, every rooftop to become accessible to you, to become a handhold for you to use for traversal. Assassin's Creed has undergone tons of changes, for better or worse, helpful additions and silly additions, and I don't think Assassin's Creed has ever necessarily had a bad parkour system. I think the closest it got to pure failure was probably Syndicate onwards. As much as I like Origins, the parkour system is beyond basic and doesn't offer a great deal. And obviously same goes for Odyssey, but even more so because of no fall damage. But of all the parkour systems, there is one to me that stands out from the rest. One that is most functional, the most diverse, gives the player the most control, and to me is the best Assassin's Creed has ever had. Now, this might come as a shock, but I'm talking about the SEO Trilogy. And right away, I know people will be mad as fuck over my thoughts on a game's traversal system, but let's put that aside for a minute, because I want to take a dive into Assassin's Creed and actually look at this, because is the SEO Trilogy the best looking parkour system? No. The most cinematic? Definitely not. But is it the best? I believe it is. I'd love to explain why I feel that way. But before we do that, I have another thing I need to tell you how I feel about, and that is Raid Shadow Legends. Now, if you've never heard of Raid, then I'm here to educate you. Raid is a dark fantasy free-to-play RPG available on both mobile and PC for free with crossplay. You can level up whilst playing through the entire voice story campaign with plenty of battles and bosses to face, try your hand in the arena taking your champions into battle against other players' assembled teams, fight against purely bosses in the dungeons to receive special loot to upgrade your champions to insane strength. Use the portal to open shards you've collected in order to get even more champions to use in battle and assemble your perfect team to take into a fight. With all of this time in lockdown, you're going to need something to occupy your time, and a game like this does the trick for me. And now they've extended the daily login rewards program from 90 to 180 days, giving you even more reason to keep coming back for your rewards, from energy refills to silver, gems, shards, and a free barbarian legendary champion, Skyl of the Drakes. If you want to find me, you can with the username LazerzZ, so what are you waiting for? Use the links down below. Download Raid and you'll get 100,000 silver, 1 energy refill, 50 gems, and 1 free champion called the Executioner. I wouldn't want to miss this if I were you, that's all I'm saying. You'll find these extra rewards in your inbox on the home screen for the next 30 days, so don't delay, download Raid right now. But anyway, let's just dive into things. Get it? I said dive, and then yeah. So when I say the SEO Trilogy, I really mean the first 4 games. We'll just call them classic Assassin's Creed. And sure, like, they're not entirely the same. AC2's climbing is a bit quicker than 1, Brotherhood allows for these crazy moves from horseback, and Revelations added the hook blade, but the base system is the same, and that's what I want to talk about. So before we start comparing, let's establish what I think is so great about this particular system. First things first is player control. Now, these games allow for incredible player agency. If you want to run up a wall and cancel out of that, you can. You don't ever have to commit and watch an animation play out. If you want to spring off of a wall at any point during the wall run, you can. And you can combine that with other techniques in order to reach climbing spots easier and faster. You have so much control over where you do and don't jump. It's always up to you. The game never chooses for you. Take a look at Assassin's Creed 3. This engine introduced the feature where if you run up to the edge, you'll stop if there's no safe distance to land at, which might sound great, right? You'll never fall to your death accidentally again, but where's the risk? Where's the fun in climbing if it's so totally, completely safe? Positive thing, at least, is you can use the jump button to jump off buildings anyway, so if you choose to fling yourself off, you can. Then we get Syndicate where you can't. You literally can't. They stop you from throwing yourself off the building. And I think that's the first core pillar that the SEO Trilogy gets so right. Not just player agency and choice, but risk and reward. It doesn't treat parkour as a method to get from A to B, but as an intrinsic gameplay feature. Your goal whilst parkouring is to, on the fly, choose the best route, one that causes the least damage, one that keeps your momentum going, and in doing so allows the player to get better and better at the system. Any great gameplay system offers a reward for the risk you're putting in. Getting to the top of viewpoints isn't just a method to unfog the map in these older games, it's a mini-game in itself. Finding the correct route to the top of the Galata Tower, St. Mark's Campanile, for one, the Borgia Towers in Brotherhood are a perfect example of this. The way that you have to take time to navigate the outer walls of these towers, sometimes whilst being chased by guards to eventually reach the top, picking the correct path, using the climb leap, sometimes stringing moves together. Honestly, these towers understand what the parkour system of these games allows for, and it uses that to its advantage. To make reaching the top not a means to an end, but part of the challenge itself, part of the fun. Not ridiculously hard, but still thoughtful rather than mindless. They offer practice for what can then be done in the open world, and so when you come to climbing or escaping from guards, you notice things pointed out to you easier, and so it makes the traversal even quicker to the player. Now, a highlight of the Ezio games is of course the tomb missions, from the Assassin tombs to the Romulus lairs to what I consider the best tombs in the franchise in Revelations. They utilize this parkour system to create entire levels made purely for the purpose of using this parkour system. The reason it works is because every move you make in these games is determined by the player. You are choosing where to go and how. You make your route faster or slower depending on your own skill level with the parkour system. You have to be active in the way you move, from making sure to grab ledges, remembering to back eject at certain points, angling jumps correctly and properly, judging if you can make particular leaps before doing so. You have to be active in the parkour system, which is why these levels work. After the SEO Trilogy, parkour becomes more passive, and although climbing a structure can still have meaning, the general movement of parkour, and to be honest most of the mechanics including combat, become tied to very specific animation. In doing so, the game looks nicer, the cinematic nature is enhanced, but you lose a lot of that active control. It's why we don't see Assassin tombs in post-Ezio Trilogy games. It's because the parkour systems don't allow for it. You're essentially pushing buttons and watching animations play out rather than directly interacting with the parkour, the same as the first 4 games in the series. No longer do you need to worry about whether a jump is safe. The game will just stop you to let you know if it's safe or not. You no longer have to angle jumps. The game will lock on to specific points in the world. No longer can you string moves together to cancel out a wall runs to jump to a higher ledge. You have to watch the animation play out because that's how it's built post-Ezio Trilogy. In making the parkour look cooler and more cinematic, you lose so much control and so much value in the parkour system. The parkour becomes a very on-rails experience. Now, the first 4 games have this element to them that I love, and that is the fact that it's very accessible to use, very basic. However, the more you play, the more you learn, and you can master some very interesting moves, some that aren't even explained to you. These moves allow for faster traversal, better momentum, and more flashier movement. Let's talk about high profile and low profile. For a start, a lot of people complain that you end up throwing yourself off of buildings a lot of the time to get down. And I mean, sure, if you just run at the edge of something, you're going to throw yourself sometimes to your death. The thing is here, however, the game isn't designed with that in mind. It's actually designed against that. If you're on a tall building, you can look for birds at the edge to know there's a leap of faith point. However, if not, you're going to need to find a route down. And to do so, you don't need to slowly climb down the side of a building or jump off. You simply have to let go of the feet button, which being A or X on Xbox or PlayStation, to allow Ezio or Altair to lower themselves more gracefully to the ground, keeping that momentum and then continue running. It requires precise player input to pull off, which is something a lot of people miss. They just throw themselves around and complain at the game, whereas in reality, the game is built with thoughtful movement in mind. You can't mindlessly do whatever you feel. Parkour requires care, and it makes it engaging. One of the biggest criticisms I've seen for these games is that the assassins will just do whatever they want. They have a mind of their own. They'll run up any wall, bump into any civilian, or throw themselves off ledges, when in reality that's not true. Assassin's Creed 1 through to Revelations require very specific button inputs. The truth of the matter is, the character is actually doing exactly what you're telling them to do. The issue isn't the game, it's you. I know that's a common rebuttal to say, oh, you're just bad, but hear me out. These games don't hold your hand when it comes to movement. An input is very precise and relies entirely on player input being correct. Pushing the right button combinations, the correct aim with the analog stick, remembering when to let go and when to push high profile in order not to bump into people or run up a wall wrong. These games are built around social stealth, and that plays into movement. You have to use the right buttons at the right time, and that makes traversal thoughtful and complex. On top of that, you have things such as ledge grabs and wall ejects. You can use them so helpfully to navigate, and it all depends on how well you understand them. The easiest way to get up a wall is to run at the wall and climb it, whereas the fastest way is to use a combination of ejects and cancellations to make your way up. You can reach the tops of buildings in such a short space of time whilst also looking flashy as hell doing so, because you have so much control over where your character goes and when he gets there. Also, back ejects allow for increased ease of movement vertically. You can use these as boosts of speed and momentum when climbing and navigating the city. No other Assassin's Creed games allow for this amount of control. They prefer a more flashy, rigid system that looks great but offers no real incentive to learn the systems and practice because it's all for show, it's not actually a challenge. I'd talk more about this in depth, but whilst researching this video I found a perfect instructional guide on the best way to move around in these games by Leo K, someone who is one of the best Assassin's Creed players that I know. He knows the ins and outs of parkour and combat and stealth like nobody I've ever seen, and he explains it all very eloquently in his videos. So I'll link one of his videos down below, but go and check out his playlist because you might learn a thing or two that I've not touched upon here with regards to not just the first 4 games, but Unity and plenty more. World design is intrinsic to the parkour in these games. The way that you see levels laid out in Assassin Tombs is actually all around you in the open world. You'll find these parkour setups with white sheets to show they're a start to get you off the ground easily. Using those in conjunction with your ejects can cause you to make some speedy moves to the rooftops. You'll find not just these obvious pathways though. There are also beams placed in specific locations to help you navigate, as well as buildings layered in a way to help you get closer to the ground faster. In addition to this, as I mentioned before, you'll find birds at the edge of roofs to indicate leap of faith points, and streets angled in particular ways to keep the flow moving when running in one single direction. You've got flower pots to move around corners, and in Revelations you have lanterns to help you jump across streets. Using all of these elements together is what allows for the fastest and best movement in Assassin's Creed, but you have to take note of your environment to do so. It takes work, the game won't do any of it for you. You have to learn when to stop holding high profile or the legs button. You have to know when to ledge grab, and you have to know when to eject. You have to learn what indicates a direction to head in when climbing. All of these things make every single element of the parkour in the first 4 Assassin's Creed games a challenge and a thoughtful system, as I keep saying. It allows for entire player control, but also a learning curve that allows for mastery over what appears to be a relatively simple system on the surface. Now let's talk about the other games, because I know people will bring up Unity. People always bring up Unity, but I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Unity's fucking bad. It looks flashy when it works, don't get me wrong. It's a game that's entirely centered around cinematics and visuals, but the way it actually plays, it's just... no. For a start, the animations take too long, and they don't allow for cancellations. I mean, none of the games post SEO Trilogy really allow for cancellations, and when they do, it's not easy and you have to time it just right. Unity is also slow and sluggish. It doesn't really allow for any of the ease of movement that the classic Assassin's Creed games do. Thing is, however, this game is probably the closest since Revelations to emulating that old formula. There's still some drawbacks, like the fact you're saved from the edges of buildings and the fact that you lock onto objects and the game does 70% of the work for you, but on paper, like so much of Assassin's Creed Unity, this parkour should have been the spiritual successor to the classic Assassin's Creed games. Like I said before, Leo K has tons of videos on Unity movement and how to make it more complex. The issue with Unity is that I feel none of these moves are readily accessible. You have to cheat the game in some way in order to execute them because the animations and the controls don't exactly allow for it the same way the classic games did. Don't get me wrong, Unity can look great and it's flashy, but it loses a lot of what made traversal in the classic games so meaningful. Here it feels on rails, scripted, and like you're watching rather than actively participating in movement and climbing. The other major engine for parkour is AC3, 4, and Rogue, in which we see this change from full player control in the SEO Trilogy to an animation-based movement for the first time, stopping you from running off of buildings, making things too safe, removing risk. You have the lock onto objects, the inability to cancel out of moves. You remove the legs button, so going into high profile makes you sprint rather than run, and quickly maneuvering whilst keeping speed becomes a lot harder. This is my least favourite of the engines, purely because the entire thing is the most on rails Assassin's Creed has ever been. They tried some Assassin 2 missions in AC3 and quickly removed them because they didn't work. The engine didn't allow for that range of movement and accuracy needed to make the tombs engaging, and so Parkour slowly became something that was a method to get from A to B, rather than an actual element of the gameplay that served to engage and challenge the player. The one thing, however, that was kept intact through all of this, and even present in Origins, is when climbing vertically there are challenges. Making your way around a building, finding the right posts and ledges to reach the top. The Lighthouse of Alexandria is a great example of this. It's the one morsel of classic Assassin's Creed that they kept intact, not removing it in favour of bypassing challenge, but allowing climbing to remain engaging, even if only briefly. Syndicate is a joke. The rope launcher makes climbing irrelevant and misses the point of being an Assassin's Creed game. Obviously, making the setting less than ideal due to the building setup, the world should always enhance the gameplay, but instead in Syndicate they built a world that didn't fit with the gameplay and so had to invent a cheat tool to allow players to navigate the space that they built. It still baffles me to this day that they didn't at any point think, oh, our setting doesn't work for Assassin's Creed, because we can't build a world for parkour to work. Someone in the office brought it up, and instead of choosing a new setting, they said, I know, we can entirely remove a core element of the gameplay by adding a grapple hook. And everyone said, great idea, mate. Next time, they should remove the need to build clever stealth environments by giving the player invisibility, or remove combat entirely by giving the player insta-kill superpowers. Oh fuck. Overall, this video is supposed to explain why I believe the original Assassin's Creed games nailed movement, traversal, player agency, and challenge by ingraining them as part of the overall parkour experience. Later games used parkour as a side element, using it only for movement, losing all substance and depth in favor of flashy animation. All puzzles with climbing thrown to the wayside because visuals are more important. Like I said, is the SEO Trilogy the best looking parkour system? No. Is it the most cinematic? Definitely not. But is it the best? I believe it is. Thanks for watching. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to go check out LazerzZ Live, where I'm going to be moving streams to. All archives for Origins and Black Flag are over there currently, and I'm going to be streaming on there full-time soon, and that'll make this channel separate so I can put videos like this out on the main channel and not have it cluttered with streams and whatnot. Thanks for all the support on my last retrospective. Since then, I've been hard at work on one for The Witcher 3, which should be dropping on the 19th of May for the 5-year anniversary. It'll be out 24 hours early, obviously, May 18th on patreon.com/asalways. So if you want to get early access to it when it eventually drops, that's the place to do it, as well as helping support me in working on these big projects. But that is it from me for now. I think the only stuff you're going to see from me is going to be streams over the next little while. I think my focus is going to be on this Witcher video, so I'll see you guys then when that eventually drops. It's going to be a fucking big one. Anyway, thanks for joining, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.